Well, hello everyone. Welcome to today's edition of Dynamics Fortnite Fridays. It's a little lonely in here. It's just me, Bart, today. Dan and Max both had other things come up. In fact, Dan actually had an unexpected funeral. So, hearts go out to you and your family, whoever it is that you are attending the funeral of today, Dan and their families. But hope all's better and that you'll be back in a fortnight with us. So instead of kind of going with the typical dad joke and all that kind of stuff, in honor of it being a funeral that Dan's not here for, I think I'm just going to jump right into content. So here we go. First thing up, we're going to author Power Pages content using PowerFX as a tool. It's not a ton of like super novel things to say about it other than it's super powerful to be able to use PowerFX now in your Power Pages development to put just what you want from whatever connector you want to use to get at it to stuff it into the contents of your page. So it could be images, it could be the way you format text to personalize things based on the logged in users, all kinds of sort of interesting little things that are tidbits to explore with that. So check it out. This next one, it was just too good a tip on this blog for me not to share. So if you use cloud flows somewhat regularly, knowing how to get it started with a trigger and then what to have happen after that is the way cloud flows have always been, and that there was one trigger and then an execution that happened after that. Well, this guy's figured out a way to use triggers in lots of other places. It's totally worth reading through here because there are lots of places where it would be really handy instead of like wait loops that kind of constantly go back out and check. You could just say, well, if there is a way for a trigger to instantiate that next step of the flow instead of having it sit there in this other state, I'd just as soon let the trigger do that. So this is guidance on how to make multiple triggers show up for different parts of an overarching Cloudflow. So take advantage of that if it's going to help you. It was pretty intuitive or informative for me when I read through it. So thanks, Matt Collins-Jones. If you happen to use RealWare devices, it is now available in the RealWare marketplace to be able to load Power Apps on your RealWare device and be able to run Power Apps in the console of your RealWare device. So pretty big update there to allow you to not just run Teams and whatever you might be servicing there, but go directly at the Power Apps interface and run applications to do all kinds of frontline things with your frontline workers who are wearing those RealWare devices. So knock yourselves out. For those of you who have wanted ERD diagrams for your Dataverse instances, well, we now have a tool built right into the Maker portal with the new kind of data experience in the Maker portal for Power Apps that will allow you to expose that ERD diagram at the assistance of Copilot. It lets you actually use Copilot to make new things. And we talked just a little bit about the making side of that, but it wasn't really the ERD experience that we talked much about, and seeing multiple tables and the relationships between them and all that kind of stuff with the data drawer and all kinds of things. So it's worth checking out. This is definitely still in preview. We're going to want to sort of give feedback on this over time in terms of how it would be made even more helpful, more useful. But start playing with that, check it out, and let us know what you think. The way we have brought features and settings to Power Apps is changing. And so, well, with this version 3.24063 in Canvas apps, that the feature flags are changing around. So the new things and everything that shows up in the new column is always going to be generally available from now on. There's not like some things that are preview that are new and some things that are available that are new. If it's in new, it's available. It's ready for primetime use. Preview is kind of those things that used to be labeled preview, but sometimes showed up in the new category. So these are ones that are not quite ready for full enterprise production use, but ones to check out because they will be generally available sometime soon. You know, experimental is even further back in that dev stage, and retired are things that are no longer things you could even really do much about, although there are some interesting things that will show up in the retired category that are generally available, and the default experience in Power Apps will be that they are on. But if there's still a way to shut them off, those things will show up in the retired area as something that you can't really like start not having on, but you could turn off if you wanted to. So there's quite a few things that are sort of noted about how this works and what it's going to look like in here. I don't think I need to read all this to you all, but it is a helpful thing to understand how we have made some of those adjustments and what each of those things do and where to go to turn things on or off. Dataverse Accelerator. If you hadn't been using this, and most people who weren't really devs hadn't done much with the Dataverse Accelerator because it was really a way to test plugin capabilities and get logs for plugins and even build some lower code plugins, but most business users weren't able to do that. And this is still pretty much a dev tool, but it was a really nice enhancement to add capabilities. So this is kind of the legacy view of the Dataverse Accelerator. I don't remember if this blog post, yes, there's the new version where you get a new tile on here that is the API playground. And so this is fully released in some environments within the release cycle. It hasn't quite made it to the United States yet. I'm hoping it shows up this weekend. If not, we'll maybe within the next 2 weeks. But this API playground extra functionality will show up in the Dataverse Accelerator when it lands in your region. And then you can just click this, and without having to authenticate or do anything else, you can actually play around with the web API or OData API of Dataverse right in this tool without having to go through any other extra hurdles in order to figure out how you can start testing web calls. So that should be a nice productivity enhancement for those of you who are doing more of that web API slash plugins, whether they're full code or low code plugins, and the testing and everything that goes along with those in that Databricks Accelerator app. Canvas Power Apps, we talked about in the last show, I believe, that the co-authoring capability in Canvas apps has been introduced. And so that's awesome. This is a little more detail around some of the things that you can do with some of the co-authoring. And the biggest thing that it is telling you is where you have to go in order to flip it on, because this is a preview feature, and preview features generally stay off by default, and that people have to go manually turn them on if they want to experience them. So if you've got an app you'd like to collaborate on, go into it, go into the preview settings like we just talked about before, that they're the ones that are in that state, and flip it on, and you can go ahead and get going with co-authoring right in the Maker portal. In terms of Power Apps and the June feature update that Clay puts together every month, this is obviously this wonderful document. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about some of these features because we just talked about co-authoring. We just talked about the ERD view. The catalog is a underutilized feature in some organizations that can be super, super helpful. And that catalog is all the things that your team builds within your enterprise and wants to make templates and reusable components that everyone should be able to just go grab, and that this catalog is solution aware so that it can be included as part of deployment pipelines into whatever environment you would like with kind of the master catalog templates and stuff is super, super helpful. So if you haven't paid attention to the catalog, it's a good reminder to go check it out because it might be super useful in a lot of different scenarios to get the stuff that the devs in your organization build out to the masses. And it's not just devs, but power users in general. If you are in GCC or any of the other sovereign clouds, it's really nice that developer environments and plans are now available there. And we've already talked about the new feature management capabilities. One last thing, especially app users, once they were created in Dataverse, they were there forever. They could be deactivated, but couldn't actually be deleted. Well, now, once you have deactivated one of those, it is possible to delete an application user, just like we are now allowed to delete real users who no longer need to be part of an environment. So that's pretty cool. And that Dataverse didn't used to pay attention to how group deletion happened, in that if someone hadn't yet logged in to Dataverse after their group was deleted, it wouldn't take any action until that person actually logged in. Now it's just going to take action whether someone's logged in or not. So that's nice. And then I think most people probably already know this, that IP firewall support, if you have a managed environment, would only apply to kind of the web or OData API. And we have just recently added an additional way you can turn things on so that that same IP firewall will block access to the TDS endpoint as well if we're not in the allowed IP range. So that's a big thing from a security standpoint, that if you wanted to make sure the reporting side or kind of the SQL side of being able to get read-only copies of that data anyway out through that TDS endpoint can now also be protected. So lots of other great stuff that Clay puts together around videos and documentation updates is always worth a good read. I'm not going to go through it on the show. If you use the business approval kit, that there have been a nice couple of things added to it. This is really just a link into the repository that will talk about what's in the release. And a new node type of in workflow is another thing that got added here for how you might think about the approvals capabilities that might be helpful. And then guidance on getting it either installed or upgraded, and where to get the actual downloads is all contained at the end of that link. COE Starter Kit, kind of the same thing, linked to GitHub and the repository. There are a few new features in the COE Starter Kit July update. So if you are running it, take your updates at least every 3 months. I like it every month, but just some folks, that's not worth doing it. If you use offline in the native offline capabilities that are there with Dataverse and model-driven apps, this is another new feature that just got added for you. So this will come to Canvas apps and the native offline experience that we enabled with Canvas apps sometime soon. This is right now only the native offline with model driven, but in that we are now allowing you to say, what are the columns that matter in the tables that I am bringing offline? So it's not just what records am I going to bring back and how do I want to write those filters, but even within that record set, what are the specific columns that are going to be used offline, so that if you were bringing the user table down or the contact table down that have hundreds of columns that are actually available in each of those, but you really only cared about 5 or 6 of them, you can shrink down those columns to the 5 or 6 that matter to you, and that's the only things that would come in your offline import. So it'll be quite a bit faster. It'll be way more efficient. It'll optimize the performance of kind of a lot of different things by allowing you to do that additional trimming. So take advantage if you are using the native offline capabilities with any of our model-driven apps. If you weren't aware, a new kit has come out. So similar to the COE Starter Kit and the Business Approval Kit, PowerCat team now has a Copilot Studio Kit. And this one isn't really for makers. This kit is all about testing copilots. And it's a whole harness with a bunch of pre-built capabilities to have you think through, well, if I am iterating on revs of any custom copilots that I'm building in Copilot Studio, how can I run those through automated testing to make sure that the enhancements that I've put in are behaving and not breaking any of the things that I have built already. So pay attention to that if that will help you in your Copilot development. And last in the Power Platform list of interesting things is Power Automate for Desktop. Its June release is now out. Just a couple of key features. One is a whole bunch new data table actions came out. So that we originally just had these 5, and now there's like almost 15 or so in there. So if you worked with data tables, you've got way more capability to work with them in Power Automate Desktop. A few new Excel actions that are pretty nice for those of you who are manipulating Excel in Power Automate Desktop. And in this one, I am planning to incorporate into a couple of pad flows that I have running that my UI elements weren't reliable enough, so I went with images instead of UI elements. Well, now there's a way to do both. Let it rely on the kind of HTML and the UI elements that are there in the page if you're trying to do web automation with this, as the primary way to work with the data. And that's gotten way better lately. But if that seems to run into a problem, let an image of what you wanted to be looking for be a fallback, just in case the HTML got mangled, but the image on the screen was still the same. You could let it look at the HTML, and if it doesn't recognize it, go to the image as that fallback and give it another shot for making the automation just happen and not fail because the HTML was a little different. So nice enhancement. There's also a new timeout property. If you want to make sure that your desktop flow can't operate longer than a certain time period, that you can just say, if it's been sitting stagnant for a certain amount of time, let's just time it out, let it exit and move on. So might be helpful in certain scenarios. Nice to know that. And kind of last but not least, if you are using some of the cloud operations within the context of desktop flow with things like the Dataverse connector or the SharePoint connector or some other things that you've been had added to that desktop flow capabilities, we can now embed connection references in there so that when you share it, other co-owners can just execute things with whatever permissions you allow, whether they have to re-authenticate or whether you're sharing your embedded connection with that capability. So nice to know that that's all been added to the new Power Automate desktop capabilities. So in terms of Power Platform, those are my updates for this actually month, 2 fortnights, because we didn't have a end of June session. It was too much going on and not enough news at that point. I've also got several updates in the customer engagement arena, so let me go through those really quickly. First off, in field service, one of the things that was really powerful in field service is you didn't have to schedule just individual workers. You could schedule a crew, and a crew could be both people and equipment. And with crew allocation instead of individual allocation, one of the things that was a pain point is if there was something about that crew that was different today and I needed to account for that, it was a pretty painful, tedious process to go into each crew and make some changes and then republish them and re-swizzle everything. Well, there's this new tool we've put into field service called the crew allocation tool. If you use crews, pay attention to this, look at the documentation, watch the videos. It is certainly worth it because it will streamline that process considerably and make it way more capable. I'm going to twist my tongue all around here. It's going to make you way more efficient at managing those crews, updating the schedules with any kind of one-day changes that might have happened across the various crews that you're managing. So take advantage if that will help you in the field service realm. For customer insights, I'm not really even going to click into this. The basic idea here is for customer insights, and this is both on the real-time journeys and on the customer insights data side of things, that if you use customer insights, you can now install it in however many environments you would like without having to buy licenses or packs of allocations or anything like that. It is now unlimited install in however many environments you want to have for non-production, production, multiple production, all that kind of stuff. If you're using it, install it and go. There is that one caveat there that in customer insights on the outbound side of things, those are still limited by however many licenses you bought. So that's the one caveat in all of this. It's worth reading through it if that is something you need to pay more attention to for you. Otherwise, just rejoice that you can put this wherever you want and not have to be limited by other licensing nuances. And the new portal has been redesigned where you manage all of this stuff, and they talk a little bit about what those redesigned elements look like in that new portal. Copilot for service. So for those of you who aren't completely up on this, this is not just the what's included with Dynamics in the service module. This is actually including capabilities if you were using the Copilot for Service with Salesforce or ServiceNow or Zendesk. And that we have improved some things about email assistance. And in this, that we've got a little bit more capability for having it grab all the right data and actually generate these emails and giving you a few more knobs to turn and levers to pull to quickly alter that instead of having to just reprompt to make some of those things aware. And case summarization. So built into Dynamics, this actually works pretty well. For the other tools, this is a relatively new added thing that makes it really easy to just summarize those cases in a way that you can then grab and drop into notes, or you grab and drop into an email summary, or whatever else you might need to do. And then the real-time streaming of what it's doing, so that you don't have to wait for it to finish. You can kind of start having conversation, and it's a little more fluid in the way it's going to respond, to make you a little less kind of pause heavy if you are an agent waiting on this to deliver you some information, is a very nice, greatly appreciated feature as well. So try to make this uh, even more efficiency oriented in the way it helps your agents out. I'm not going to click into this one either, because I think this news has made it very publicly, but I'll just announce on the show the standalone contact center as a service that still got the Dynamics branding, but is not at all tied to the Dynamics 365 kind of CRM features. You don't have to have customer service. You don't have to have sales. You don't have to have anything in the Dynamics realm to buy the contact center elements for doing the phone management of not only lines that you might stand up with carriers that we can manage for you, and the numbers, whether they're toll free or not, and all that stuff. But we'll also manage things like your IVR, and we will manage the routing of those calls to the agents, and have all kinds of different AI based tools to recognize what is the intent of this call, where should it go from a routing standpoint, into what queue and what agents are in that queue, and all that kind of stuff. And of course, it's not just phones, it's all sorts of omni-channel capabilities in there. So we can route chats, we can route SMS messages, we can route social media posts and WhatsApps, and Apple Business Chat, and all kinds of different channels that we can incorporate into that contact center, and have it deliver all of those interactions to the agents in your agent desktop, and you can service whatever CRM you want inside of that platform at this point. So take advantage if that's something you're looking for, as contact center as a service. Check ours out, even if you're not ready to take on our CRM. And of course, it's even better if you used our Dynamics, especially customer service module under there, because all of it's wired up to pre-populate a lot of these things in our customer service realm. Last but not least, in customer insights, mostly in the data side of things, one of the things that we would have always kind of wanted is better integration with tools that help people optimize their websites, like Optimizely, and being able to take real-time personalization like Optimizely and have it participate with our CDP, the customer insights data side of things, to gather all the rich profile information at runtime, right when it needs to be doing things the way Optimizely works. So we now have a partnership with Optimizely. So we've got the ability to use these two things together and do a really nice job of delivering great customer experiences based on all the real-time capabilities that Customer Insights brings forward, with the Optimizely capabilities to deliver that, especially on web properties. So if that's of interest to you, explore this a little bit, and maybe even get a not only demo, but a live 30-day trial or something to play around with those capabilities. As always, there have been lots of solution updates, and now this is a month's worth. So you're going to see a lot of, hey, it went to this version, and then that version, and then that version after that on a lot of these capabilities. So all of these are available for you to take on new capabilities or bug fixes in each of these various microservices that are all part of our Power Platform Solutions framework. If any of them are important to you, take new updates. And if you want to know more about what might be contained in any of those updates, we've got these links to help fill that blank as well. So with that, it's Dynamics Fortnite Fridays for July the 12th. It's been Bart talking to you. Sorry Dan wasn't here and we didn't have Max producing or anything, but hopefully this has been helpful, and we will catch you all in a fortnight at the end of July. Thanks all.